The number of foreigners in Canada's prisons has surged by over 30% since the Liberals came into office, and Ottawa claims to have lost track of over a third of their citizenship information.
A chain migration bill is going into its third reading in the House of Commons after Conservative and Bloc Québécois amendments were revoked.
British Columbia Premier David Eby dropped plans to run his own anti-tariff ad after meeting with the federal government following a breakdown of trade talks caused by an Ontario ad. Hello Canada, it's Wednesday, November 5th, and this is the True North Daily Brief. I'm Isaac Lamoureux.
I'm Alex Zoltan.
We've got you covered with all the news you need to know. Let's discuss the top stories of the day and the True North exclusives you won't hear anywhere else. Ottawa has seemingly lost track of nationality details for a third of foreign prisoners in Canada, as the number of non-Canadian inmates reported by the Correctional Service of Canada hits a record high, increasing by 31% since 2015. The figures, obtained by Conservative MP Blaine Calkins in a written parliamentary question, show the Correctional Service of Canada is unaware of the citizenship of 319 foreign offenders, or 37% of the total, despite spending $126 million last year to house them. Calkins' questions are intriguing. How many foreign nationals are in Canada's federal lockups? Where did they come from? What crimes got them committed? And at what cost? The figures covering 2015 to 2016 The figures covering 2015-16 to the current 2024-25 fiscal year show non-Canadian inmates now represent nearly 6% of the total federal prison population, up from 4.5% a decade ago. The government response claims the Correctional Service of Canada cannot provide a specific cost breakdown for housing non-Canadian inmates because it does not distinguish costs by citizenship status. It did, however, include average annual costs per inmate across all federal offenders, which have ballooned 34% from $116,500 in 2016-17 to $156,700 in 2023-24, with figures for the current fiscal year still pending. According to the latest figures from Statistics Canada, the average Canadian's annual income is around $59,900. This means keeping a single non-Canadian inmate behind federal bars now costs taxpayers more than 2 years' worth of their before-tax income. So Alex, what are the demographics like among those foreigners in prison, and what could be done to reduce the sheer number of those in prisons?
Well, I'll address your first question first, Isaac. So in terms of what demographics look like among those foreigners or non-Canadians in prisons, unfortunately, we don't know. And it appears as though Correction Services Canada also does not know. So the total number, if my memory serves me correctly, is 457 non-Canadians in federal prisons. Federal prisons are generally reserved for individuals who have been convicted of a serious indictable crime. Those who are awaiting trial, by contrast, would typically be in provincial prisons. Of those 457 non-Canadians in federal prisons, over 300 of them, Correction Services Canada says they do not know, or they are not willing to disclose what their citizenship status is. That obviously is a curious, if not concerning, information gap. I sometimes joke that it doesn't exactly exude confidence in me that we're going to be able to deport these individuals upon their release from prison, given that we don't know what country they're from. I did email Canadian Correction Services Canada, and I'll read you what I emailed them. I said, "To whom it may concern, I am writing to kindly seek clarification on data provided in the Correctional Services of Canada response to parliamentary question Q301 from the 45th Parliament first, responded to on October 31st by the Ministry of Public Safety. In the breakdown of non-Canadian inmates by country of citizenship, a substantial 319 entries are categorized as, quote, unknown. Out of a reported total, of 894. There's actually a lot more non-Canadian inmates than I originally thought earlier. This represents over 35% of the listed non-Canadian inmates, which seems unusually high. Could you please explain the reasons for this classification? For instance, is it due to incomplete intake records, self-reported information not being provided, privacy protections under the Privacy Act, or other operational factors? Understanding this would be helpful to provide context to my readers and to ensure transparency in how citizenship data is collected and reported for federal inmates. Thank you for your time and assistance. I gave Correction Services Canada a rather generous 24-hour runway for a response, and they did not respond by deadline or at all. So the question of how many non-Canadians are from where remains unanswered, and it's not exactly clear why. In terms of your second question, how could we reduce the number of non-Canadians in prison? I think the obvious answer is to reduce immigration generally, or to have greater safeguards in terms of who we are letting into the country. A controversial bill dubbed the, quote, chain migration bill by Conservatives is moving forward after the Liberals and NDP rejected amendments that would have required stricter security checks, language tests, and stronger ties to Canada for new citizens. The bill, known as Bill C-3, is now headed for its third reading. Bill C-3, also known as an Act to Amend the Citizenship Act, passed with 169 in favor to 163 against in the House of Commons on Monday after the NDP voted to reverse the amendments made by the Bloc Québécois and Conservatives during a committee meeting. The NDP had no say at the committee level as they do not hold official party status. The bill, which is expected to pass in the House of Commons, is in its third reading and will be voted on in the Canadian Senate, and it would automatically grant citizenship to individuals born abroad who are descendants of immigrants who later became citizens. Without the bill, there is a, quote, first-generation limit, meaning those born in another country are only automatically citizens if one parent was born in Canada. In December of last year, the Parliamentary Budget Officer estimated that a previous iteration of the bill would grant citizenship to approximately 115,000 new people over 5 years, at a cost to taxpayers of around $20.8 million during the same period. During immigration committee meetings, the Bloc and Conservatives would have required these new automatic citizens to demonstrate proficiency in either English or French, to possess a basic knowledge of Canadian history, to pass security checks, and to extend the length of time the parent of the new citizen had to be in Canada from 3 years to 5. NDP Member of Parliament Jenny Kwan introduced an amendment reversing the joint amendments from the Conservatives before the bill passed, and similarly passed on the House floor. Conservative MP Michael Ma lamented that a party without official status and that didn't participate in the committees was able to reverse, quote, months of work done at the committee with the Liberal government. He said the committee's work was being, quote, undone by the post-nationalist NDP and Liberals.
It is not a high bar to demand proficiency in one of our official languages. It is not a high bar to demand that a prospective Canadian citizen should understand the responsibilities and privileges of Canadian citizenship. We expect much more of someone getting their driver license. It is not a high bar to demand a security assessment, but it is a high bar for Canadians of convenience who would like to wear Team Canada's jersey without being a team player in our national ring.
Without the Conservatives and Bloc safeguards, Isaac, this bill is sure to bring in over 100,000 new immigrants to Canada at a time when we have a housing crisis, many strains on our healthcare system, so on and so forth, many of which who don't speak English. How could that affect Canada's institutions generally?
Yeah, Alex. So I think the first thing to say is that this isn't just a theoretical debate about passports. It lands directly on institutions that are already buckling under the weight of record population growth. On scale alone, we're not talking about some rounding error. The Parliamentary Budget Officer pegged an earlier version of Bill C-3 at roughly 115,000 new citizens over 5 years. And the Immigration Minister couldn't even say how many people would qualify under the latest version, or whether they'd face criminal record checks, language expectations, or even a basic citizenship test. So you're potentially adding a six-figure number of people to the system with almost no clarity on screening or integration. And we can already see what this would look like in schools. In Calgary, the public board recently said that about 31% of its 142,000 students are learning English as a second language. So roughly 8 kids in a typical 28-student classroom, and it's now asking the province for $148 million just to cope with complexity, including hiring interpreters for regular classrooms. So if you layer tens of thousands of more automatic citizens on top of that, many of whom may arrive with limited English or French, the pressure hits education budgets, special needs supports, and even independent schools that already serve a lot of newcomer families. And we know healthcare is facing the same dynamic. Under Mark Miller, non-permanent residents climbed to about 7% of Canada's population, and the Fraser Institute recorded the longest median wait time on record, which is 30 weeks between referral and treatment. Ottawa was running ads overseas bragging about free healthcare, while provinces were warning that hospitals and clinics were at capacity. If Bill C-3 quietly swells the pool of people entitled to full services without a corresponding plan to expand doctors, nurses, and beds, you're deepening a crisis in healthcare. Ontario Dr. Mike Hart previously told True North that language barriers and rising population pressures are worsening the province's doctor shortages and wait times, noting that one of his patients now faces a 3-year wait just to see an ear, nose, and throat specialist. And Hart said when two people are speaking different languages, it is going to complicate things and make things difficult, adding that the situation is getting worse as population growth outpaces the number of available specialists. There's also a rule of law and social cohesion angle. Conservatives tried to attach very basic conditions such as speaking an official language, knowing something about Canada, clear security checks, and those were stripped out. At the same time, birthright citizenship remains untouched despite a documented rise in birth tourism and hundreds of thousands of people in limbo on expired visas or dubious asylum claims. So the risk isn't just that we add 100,000 people, it's that we add them into schools, hospitals, and social programs that are already strained, while signaling that the state is more focused on expanding the passport club than on making sure the responsibilities and expectations of being Canadian are shared and enforceable, which of course will fuel public backlash against both immigration and the institutions themselves. British Columbia's NDP government has abandoned its plans to run anti-tariff ads in the US, which would have highlighted American tariffs on Canadian goods, after meeting with the federal government. Eby confirmed the ads wouldn't be aired alongside Federal Intergovernmental Affairs Minister Dominic LeBlanc while speaking with reporters in Vancouver after a forestry summit between the provincial and federal governments. The admission came in response to a question from City News reporter Monica Gull, who had directed her query to LeBlanc. Gull asked whether Ottawa was concerned about BC moving ahead with an anti-tariff advertising campaign after Ontario's similar effort prompted US President Donald Trump to suspend trade talks with Canada. Rather than allow LeBlanc to answer, Eby stepped in. Cutting off further responses, even though Gull's original question had been directed to him, LeBlanc said, quote, "You've just answered it, thank you." The shelved BC campaign was intended to highlight what Eby has described as, quote, 50% combined duties and tariffs on Canadian softwood lumber entering the United States higher, he claims, than those facing Russian fiber products. So, Alex, obviously you've been following the Cowichan lands dispute. Did Eby address that potential private property dispute during the press conference too? And if so, what did he say?
So, Isaac, I did attend the town hall on the Cowichan Tribes v. Canada decision in Richmond last Tuesday. The city lawyer for the city of Richmond has confirmed that this will impact landowners in BC, in that particular area. It's about 7 square kilometers in Richmond, but this also has the ability to impact the entire province. BC's, I guess you could call it, unique approach to reconciliation is rooted in the fact that our province was confederated into the rest of Canada much later than other provinces. And so we did not actually have negotiated treaties with a lot of the tribes here in this province. That's why you'll hear a lot more land acknowledgements in BC that will begin with, "We are on the unceded territory of X First Nations tribe." Don't take my word for it, though. I have spoken to numerous lenders who have said they will not touch this particular area. And David Eby himself said that this is of serious concern, and he said that he would be worried. So this is absolutely a something burger. And everybody in BC should be very, very concerned about its potential implications on private property ownership in the province.
That's it for today, folks. Thanks for tuning in. You can stay on top of new episodes every weekday by subscribing to the Daily Brief on iTunes and Spotify. Also, while you're at it, make sure to hit us with a 5-star rating and please leave a review.